Mamta for the invite. I'll start with a brief introduction video of ValueQuest, and then we'll get into the presentation.
He may be the new kid on the block. At an early age, he's identified the art of picking up multi-bagger stocks. And for him, performance really speaks.
Ravi has learned from majority of it comes from Mr. Jhunjhunwala, who is one person who is really happy that he works with me. I think the inputs and the results have been very good. I would like to credit more to him than to my office.
I'll play one more video, small short video about our market calls.
Let me start by making.
You have many titles.
Sorry.
In India. So people who are thousands of kilometers away, they say that you are the Warren Buffett of India.
Sorry, one second.
Someone says that you are a big bull.
I'm really sorry. Two videos were playing simultaneously.
Let me start by making that point. A lot of people think that COVID is the needle that pricked the bubble, but I feel it is the other way around. It is an accelerator or a fuel that's going to increase the fire even more. COVID, what does COVID stand for the market? I have an acronym for you, and the acronym is COVID. The C stands for basically consolidation across sectors, cost-cutting initiatives, and benign central bankers. O stands for opportunity to grab market share, for example, China +1, and it's an opportunity in adversity. V stands for attractive valuation, and it is a V-shaped recovery that we are witnessing. I stands for India First, Atmanirbhar. Government has initiated so many policies to help the local sectors. And D stands for accelerated adoption and digitization.
I hope you are able to see my screen.
Yes, Ravi bhai.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was a brief introduction about ValueQuest. Of course, some of the data is slightly dated. We managed today over 1700 crores of AUM, and we've been in business since over 11 years. So today's topic is about wealth creation through equities. It is simple but not easy. Now, Warren has given this quote long back, and I often wondered what he meant by that. If it is simple, then why it is not easy? And we tend to confuse the two words, simple and easy. Simple does not necessarily mean easy. The opposite of simple is not hard, but it is complicated, and the opposite of easy is hard. So it is a very simple thing. So for example, it is very simple. The prescription for losing weight is very simple. Eat less or stop eating. But it is very difficult to implement. Just like that, it is easy to say what to be done, but it is difficult to do that. So as the quote goes, in theory, it is very easy, but in practice, it is very difficult. So to begin with, a disclaimer from my end. Nothing in this presentation should be construed as an invitation to invest in a particular company or a stock. Please refrain from asking any company-specific questions. Any companies, if mentioned, will be purely as an example and not a recommendation to buy or sell. In fact, this presentation is full with lots and lots of examples of charts, and which is essentially, some of that I have lived through as an experienced it firsthand. Some of that is something that I have learned from history. But I think you will enjoy going through the history and past, and but please do not think of it as a recommendation to buy or sell. None of the material is proprietary, and sources are mentioned wherever available. With that, so what is the simple investment philosophy? Everybody knows, right? Buy good businesses at fair or cheap valuations and then hold them forever. Essentially, that is what investing is. Or in other words, it is buy right and sit tight. That's all we have to do. Now let's get into the implementation of this buy right and sit tight and see what kind of complications arise when we try doing that. Okay, so first what we have to figure out, what is a good business. Then we have to figure out what is fair valuations. And then once we have figured and bought it, then we have to figure out how long do I sit tight. So blue chips, everybody knows what are blue chips. In essentially, if you go to a casino, you know, the blue chips are the chips which has the highest value. The term was taken over by Wall Street to mean companies that are really, really quality. So if the business is really good quality, then they are called as blue chips. And I'm sure you know a lot of examples of blue chips company in India. And if you buy blue chips, then absolutely there is no problem, right? You can't go wrong buying blue chips, can you? So this is just a chart which shows that in 1996, when the Sensex was there, about 21 companies survived from the original Sensex by 1996. Sensex was formed in 1979. Then in 2001, 17 companies survived. And in 2010, only 12 of those companies survived. And if I were to extrapolate this to 2021, I can guarantee you less than 6-7 companies of the original Sensex are still part of the Sensex. This is the left side table is 2001 ranking of the top 10 companies. And you can see in 2021, only 6 of those companies, only 4 of those companies are still there in the top companies. 6 new companies have made an entry into the top 10. And I can assure you in 2031, out of this 10 also, less than 50% will still be there, because that's just the nature of the beast. So technology is eating every industry. So if you look at it, the blue circles are essentially non-tech companies and the orange circles are essentially the tech companies. In 2006, there was only Microsoft, which was part of the top 5 companies. In 2011, when Microsoft was out, and only Apple was part of the top 5 companies in US. Today, all 5 companies that are the biggest in the world, and everybody knows this, these are the FANG stocks as they are known, are the top 5 companies in the world. In fact, yesterday itself, Apple got replaced by Microsoft as the most, not expensively valued, but highly valued tech company in the world. In fact, the highest any company in the world, highest valued. So world is changing, and world is changing faster, and it is changing in unpredictable ways. So it is very difficult to figure out what's going to happen. So this is a chart which shows various adoption of various technologies, telephone, electricity, refrigerator, stove, clothes washer, and how much time these technologies took to penetrate and reach 100% penetration. So if you see, telephone was invented way back in 1900 by in the early 1900s by Alexander Graham Bell, but it took forever. If you remember the bad old days of 1980s, when we used to apply for a landline, and it used to take forever for us to get a landline connection. So gone are those days, and we get mobile and we get internet penetration, and new applications reach gigantic proportions in terms of penetration almost overnight. So that is one big change that is happening. And now everybody says they are a technology company. JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, we used to know them as finance companies, and no more. Brokers or finance companies or banks, whatever you call them, but now they are calling themselves as technology company. And now nobody is actually staying in their lane anymore. New business models and technologies come to the market, and the incumbent business models are challenged. New competitors emerge, and prior partners also start to resemble competitors. So what I am trying to say over here is, which will be explained further through examples, is that no business is sacrosanct, only one line of business. People keep moving into other people's line of business as well. So Mercedes-Benz used to have BMW and Lexus as their competitors. Today, Tesla, Uber, Google, companies that didn't exist more than, some of them not even a decade old, and some of them less than 2 decades old, and now they are competing with the giants of the auto industry. So the lines are blurring between what is an old economy company and a new economy company. So Walmart's competitors were Target and Costco. Now it's Amazon and Alibaba. Comcast, Time Warner, Verizon, these are all examples from US industries, but I'm sure similar things are going to pan out in India also. These are the companies that were the media companies, media giants of the world. Today it is Netflix and YouTube. So disruption happens gradually, then suddenly. This is chart of a company that was the market leader in smartphones before Apple launched its phone. So after the launch of Apple, still the company continued doing well for some period of time. If you see, the Apple iPhone was launched in Jan 2007. For almost a year, this company continued to do well. Now this is a stock price. The stock price continued to do well. Then 2 years down the line, suddenly there was a drop. And then another 5 months, and the company almost went into oblivion. Disruption happens gradually, and then it happens suddenly. Which company is this? BlackBerry. Look at what they were saying at that point of time. BlackBerry is still leader of the pack. CNN money. RIM as the company, research in motion, revenues, profits surge, business. BlackBerry makers snags half of US smartphone market. They had more than 50% market share in US. U2 had jumped ship from Apple to research in motion. So when managements also cannot see the kind of disruption that is ahead, how can investors see it? So disruption happens gradually, then suddenly. Another example. Neither Redbox nor Netflix are even on the radar screen in terms of competition. This is a famous quote, or rather infamous quote by Jim Keyes, the CEO of Blockbuster. Blockbuster was a video rental company in US, and they did not consider Netflix as a competition. In fact, they had an they had an option to buy out Netflix for $50 million. They did not. Today we can see Netflix has become the giant. I can hear some disturbance. Yeah. Today Netflix has become the giant, but and Blockbuster has been relegated to the dust. It does not exist anymore. In fact, closer home, if you see, there was a statement made yesterday by Rajiv Bajaj that it does not consider themselves and the other two-wheeler players as the legacy player, and they will champion. They are champions, and champions will have oats for breakfast. What is oats? It's the Ola, Ather, and other technology companies that are trying to target the two-wheeler industry. And this is a live example in front of us, and in 5 years' time, it will be very clear whether it is Rajiv Bajaj who will be right, or whether it will be this new age companies that will eat up the lunch of Bajaj and Hero Honda. So, I mean, if I were to go by what has happened elsewhere in the world, it is actually very, very clear that the incumbents are going to end up having their lunch eaten away. But time will tell. Disruption happens gradually, then suddenly. The gradually part is over in two-wheelers. The suddenly part is almost here. This is a chart which is showing the number of new disruptive unicorns that are being born. In Q2 FY21, calendar year 21, almost 136 companies became unicorns, and a lot of these companies are from India. India is also witnessing a big boom in terms of new companies becoming bigger in size. So this is just going to accelerate the trend of disruption for the incumbents, and various industry will have to bear the brunt of this, and time will tell whether somebody is able to survive or not. In every industry, this threat is there. So those were some examples of how the business is changing very fast. Now, this is a chart which shows that the cigarette consumption in US has been constantly falling. This chart shows from 2005 to 2016 how the cigarette consumption is falling. In fact, from 1981 to 2017, there has been a 44% drop in the cigarette consumption. Hello. I can hear some disturbance.
Ravi bhai, still there?
Yeah, still there.
Let me check.
Yeah. Okay, this is better. So,
Ravi bhai, can you please unmute yourself?
Sorry about that. Yeah. So as you can see, the cigarette consumption has been falling. Would you buy a company like that where the volume growth of the company, of the industry itself is falling? This?
The answer could be yes also.
Altria, which is the parent company of Philip Morris, has given 71,000% return from 1981 to 2017. So yeah, to level one thinking, it sounds like if there is no growth in the industry, why would you want to buy? But as somebody rightly pointed out, the answer was right, that you should have bought, because it is one of the best performer and wealth creator of the last 2-3 decades. But we will have to see whether that pans out true over the next few decades or not. Similar story with Coca-Cola also. The volumes have been falling in sugary beverage, water-based beverages for a long period of time now. People are moving away from having soft drinks, but the stock price is not falling. Why would that be the case? Simple. They keep increasing the prices. They are making more money from fewer people than they used to earlier. So this is an example of a company that got listed about 3-4 years back. Would you buy this company? India, at that point, the backdrop was India is going through tough times economically. IPO market was not hot at all. The PE that company was coming at was 39x. At that point of time, 39x was very, very expensive because the whole market was probably available at less than 15 times. And the market cap of that company was 19,000 crores. On listing, it would probably be 25,000 crores plus, 1.5 times revenue in an industry with tough business economics. And there were some really big entrenched players who were ruling the roost at that point of time. So at prima facie, it looks like a bet that you would not take. But look at what has happened to that company after its listing. DMart's market cap is more than 3 lakh crores today. That is astoundingly more than 10x return for a company that looked like it was expensively priced to begin with. Would you buy this company? PE 38x, market cap close to 1900 crores, raising 330 crores. On listing, it would be 2300 crores and 6.5 times revenues in an industry with tough business economics. Again, the same thing, it has turned out to be a wonderful.
Ravibai, you need to unmute yourself again because I'm muting everyone together.
Yeah, sure. I could hear a lot of echo. Yeah, so
Yeah,
Jubilant Foods, which is essentially the franchisee of the pizza maker Domino's, today is at about 50,000 crores market cap. This has been a 25 bagger over the last 11 years. So seemingly expensive stocks have generated fantastic wealth. Okay, this is a chart of a company which is in the pharma industry. And if you have been tracking pharma industry, you would know if US FDA gives an adverse observation, it is very difficult to come out of that very easily. So Divi's had a almost a 60% kind of a price drop sometime in the year 2014-15. And there were some really severe observation as to why, and it looked like it is almost not going to survive this crisis. But this is what happened after that. The stock has been phenomenal winner. So, and this is a real life example. Many people missed buying that because people tend to extrapolate the negative news over a long period of time, ignoring the basic fundamentals of the company. So this is my first point. To be able to create wealth in investing, you need to have the vision to see the future, and it is not always very clear what the future is going to be. All the examples that I gave, whether it is about a new hot IPO or whether it is about the disruption, it is essentially to make the point that it is very difficult to visualize in real time whether a particular company is going to create wealth or no. In hindsight, it is very easy to say one should have bought DMart on listing, but at that point of time, it looked very expensive. And we can, similar thing is panning out today as well. And it is a real life example that you can go through. A company called Nykaa is getting listed, and everybody thinks it's crazy valuations. So let's see what happens in future. So you can't go wrong buying blue chips, can you? So Amazon, today we know it is the most highly valued company in the world with over $2 trillion of market cap, almost $2.8 trillion. Amazon had a near-death experience in 2001 when it fell 90% from the peak of dot-com bubble in 2000. How many of us can hope to hold on to our position through such a dramatic fall? Nokia used to be considered a blue chip until it was not. In 2000 peak, it peaked at about $60, and today it quotes at less than $6. Xerox was a blue chip company. It is responsible for more than 40, 50 path breaking technologies, including the mouse that we use today. And where is it today? It is not even considered as a leading company anymore. So you can't go wrong buying blue chips. Closer home, Hindustan Unilever, we know that it is a fantastic company and FMCG is a great business. Yet from the year 2001 to 2010, there was a 10-year period where HUL gave 0 returns over a 10-year period. Would you be able to hold on through that? Reliance, from 2007 peak till 2017, end of 2016, had given 0 returns for a period of 10 years. Would you have been able to hold on through that? And this was a time when they were actually making huge investments, almost $20 billion kind of investment in telecom, and that was unheard of. And they were taking on so much debt. Recently, when they deleveraged by selling stake to Facebook, they had close to 3 lakh crores kind of debt. Of course, the net debt was slightly lower at 1.75 lakh crores, but gross debt of 3 lakh crores. When that kind of debt is on the books, when there is huge disruption happening of technology all around you, when you don't know what the future of the capex that they are doing will be, is it so easy to hold on through all this? I mean, Bhagwanનું નામ લઈને અને મુકેશભાઈમાં faith રાખીને જ we can hold on to this. Otherwise, it is very difficult to hold on for a 10-year period without any kind of return. So I have this. There is a very good presentation, 20-minute presentation. I would suggest you can also take a look on the website microcapclub.com. Ian Kessel is the founder of that club. And what he says over here is investors worry far too much about businesses and stocks that are working in their portfolio. If a company is doing well, you tend to worry about it because why? You are sitting on profits. And if you are sitting on profits, it becomes even more. You don't want the stock to fall at all. And if that happens, then the conviction to hold goes for a toss. So buying and selling are not the only 2 investment decisions that we have to take. Holding is a decision, waiting is a decision, saying no to new ideas is also a decision, doing nothing is also a decision. And these are the decisions that you take far more often than buy or sell. In fact, if you take less sell decision, the better. So, but holding on and taking out a different level of conviction. Only after you hold on to a great company, as stock goes up 5-10x, and then your emotions, fears, cost, and screams at you to sell, that you are an idiot to hold on to this. Stock is expensive, sell. Market is going to fall, sell. There is a recession coming, sell. There are hundreds of reasons for you that will make you think you should be selling. It has become too large a stock in your portfolio, sell. So everything will always constantly push you to take some action in your portfolio. Only when you have survived this kind of a period, then you know what it is to have conviction of your own. You have to do your own work and you have to fight all the noise coming your way, which is essentially asking you to sell. So we went through the buy decisions, which obviously is very difficult because you don't know what the future is going to be. Now let's take a look at some of the, so buying good businesses at fair valuation. The second part of the equation is fair valuation. What is fair valuation? So this is a chart of a company called Nestle. We all know it's a great business. It's a fantastic company, but it has never been cheap. In its entirety of existence, it has always been expensive as compared to the market. It has been very expensive as compared to other blue chips also. So the light blue line that you see going up is the stock price performance, and the shaded blue area that you can see is the valuation. Today, the PE multiple is above 60, 70, and obviously we find it expensive. But if you see the 60 plus multiple is almost sustaining for the past 6 years. So you could have taken the call in 2015-16 that this is crazy valuations, I need to sell. And guess what? The stock has gone from 6,000 rupees. This is when the Maggie crisis had happened, to almost 18,000 rupees. So it's been a three-bagger since the time when the valuations peaked. So valuations are not necessarily a good judge of what the future is going to hold. The valuations can sustain far longer than you and I can imagine. Don't make valuations as your point, the sole reason for buying and the sole reason of selling. Of course, it doesn't mean that you don't look at valuations at all, but it cannot be the starting point for making a decision. Again, this example of DMart. DMart also, you can see the PE ratio has always been expensive. Even right now, it is very expensive. And this is the last 4-5 year chart. Someday will it correct? It can. I have no way of saying it can't. But it will not be for the reason that it is expensive. It will be more for the reason that the business fundamentals deteriorate. And what will be those business fundamentals that deteriorate? Some competition might come in, which might lead to erosion of the P&L as well as the balance sheet. You have to keep your eyes focused on that P&L and balance sheet, and that is when stock price will react as well. Until then, I believe the stock will remain expensive. Seemingly cheap stocks. So we have seen that how not buying expensive stocks has turned out to be a wrong decision, very expensive decision. But even more expensive decision is buying cheap stocks. Yes Bank was always relatively cheaper than other banks. But if you had that slight sense of market, slight common sense, you always knew something was not right with Yes Bank. Rana Kapoor was always a little more maverick than you would like your banker to be. You want your banker to be prudent, not cowboys. And he always used to take far more risk than one should be taking. So in the period leading to the eventual collapse, it always looked like this company is going very cheap. The business fundamentals are very strong. But look at what happened, as in when the scam got unearthed. So what looks seemingly cheap can turn out to be a very expensive buy, while what looks seemingly expensive can actually turn out to be a very good buy. Another example of this has been Idea. It has been always very tempting to buy Idea over Bharti or Reliance. Why? Because, 4 rupees, 5 rupees, 6 rupees, 10 rupees, it has been a black hole where the promoters have kept putting in money. Vodafone put in money. At 120, Vodafone put in money. At 60, 80, 10, 12, 15 rupees also promoters put in money. And the stock kept falling. So insiders know the best, but even despite insiders knowing, you can see that no amount of insider information can fight the business economics. If the business economics are deteriorating and deteriorating fast, then it is going to go down. Doesn't matter how cheap the stock looks. Another example of this is Bajaj Finance. If you can see in 2015, when the stock had already rallied, from 2011 to 15, the stock had a fantastic rally, and it was quoting at 4x price to book value already. And if you would have sold off, you would have missed one of the biggest winners of your life. The stock went on to become another 20 bagger from there, and the valuations went from 4x to almost 10x price to book. So what is expensive and what is fair valuations is a very, very difficult call to take. What looks seemingly expensive might not be, and what looks seemingly cheap might not be. So this is a company, it's another cigarette manufacturer, VST Industries. From 1996 to 2009, this stock had virtually not gone anywhere. It was available at close to 200 rupees in 1996, and it was again available at 200 rupees in 2009. That is almost 15 years after that price had first come. would you still hold on to this? Well, one person did. Radhakishan Damani, he used to own almost 24-25% of the company, and there was a three-way battle between BAT, ITC, and him to take control of that company. And in the beginning would have taken a bet of close to 50 crores. 50 crores was a big amount even at that point of time. But today he receives a dividend check in excess of 100 crore. That is the kind of power. Even though the stock price didn't go anywhere, VST was always an underperformer in terms of industry. ITC always used to do far better. Just take a look at what happened. The stock has gone from 200 rupees to it went to almost 4,800 and today is available at 3,300 rupees. Now, every day's price movement is more than 200 rupees, which was the original cost price for Radhakishan Damani. So, can you visualize seeing your 50 crores remain at 50 crores for 15-year period when every other stock is going up and so much wealth is being generated? It is a difficult call to hold on to a company that is not doing well for such a long period of time. So this was more about picking more company-specific price-based action, or even for that matter, whether it's cheap or expensive. But there are other macro signals that will constantly unnerve you. There will always be reason that will be, that will shake you out of your position. And the biggest test, of course, will remain the price volatility. It is very difficult to see a 30, 40, 50% price drop in one of your large holdings. So this is a chart of US market from March 2009 bottom to the current period. And as you can see, there have been numerous reasons to sell. The jobs data was bad. The BP oil spill happened. The S&P downgraded US debt in 2011. There was a fiscal cliff that was coming up. There were all these European economies that were going through tough time, and there was fear of one of the PIGS economy defaulting. PIGS is being Portugal, Spain, those European economies. There was Ebola virus outbreak, US elections. So many reasons why you should have sold off, and this also includes COVID-19, which was one of the biggest reason, and it saw a huge fall as well, almost 40% kind of a drop in a matter of month. So it looked like this is a there are hundreds of reasons why one should have sold off, but take a step back and see all those reasons turned out to be noise. Every future correction looks like a threat. Every past correction looks like an opportunity. Closer home, this is the chart of Sensex since 1980. And there is Harshad Mehta scam. There is Ketan Parekh scam over here. There is global financial crisis. There is COVID crisis and many other reasons. Kargil war. So many things have happened. And every time I'm sure people have had reasons to sell out. Never do you get a reason, because the bad news makes headlines. Gradual improvement does not make headline. Only negative news make headline. Positive news rarely make headlines. Can you hold tight through this? There is a war, so that this September 11 attacks happened. Markets were closed in US for few days. Our markets were also closed, and when they opened, you opened with a gap of almost 10-15%, and it would have shaken up the biggest of people in terms of their ability to hold. So this was a 1987 crash in Dow. That was a 22.6% drop. At the bottom, during intraday, it had almost fallen 27-28%. Can you imagine 1/3 of the world wealth eroded in one session? So this happened not only in US, it had repercussion worldwide also. And every market worldwide fell this kind of a number. Will you be able to hold on through this? And this is the global financial crisis, of course. Lehman Brothers going bankrupt. So many reasons. We were staring at an abyss. Even the central bankers didn't know what is going to happen. Will the banking system be able to survive? Will the faith and foundation in the US banking system able to, will the people retain their confidence in that? Housing crisis had become banking crisis. And then, of course, we keep hearing from the sage of Omaha that our favorite holding period is forever. But can you hold forever? Especially when there are so many reasons all the while to sell. Even Warren makes mistakes. So he was heavily long the airline industry right before COVID struck. And airlines are one of the worst hit industry. And the stock fell almost 50-60%. And after that kind of a drop, Warren sold his holdings. I am sure it is not Warren's own call. It is probably the new investment managers that he is appointed to run Berkshire Hathaway. They are the ones who took the call. But the decision had his blessings also. And you can see that even the top investors of the world are not immune to what's happening in the world and what's happening in the stock markets. This is an example closer home that I like to go through because I have lived through this. In 2008, when the global financial crisis happened, LIC Housing used to quote at 400 rupees before it was split, which over here the stock price is showing as 80 rupees. Now, at that point of time, it became very clear to me that there was a crisis worldwide and one should be selling. I did sell a lot of my stock as well at that point of time, but I did not sell out 100%. So if I had 100 rupees worth of stock, I would have sold 50 rupees and held on to 50 rupees. That 50 rupees that I held on became 25. That is the kind of vicious fall that we saw. So in hindsight, of course, I should have sold off all 100 rupees. Why would I hold on even that 25 rupees also? One of the stock that I continued holding on to was LIC Housing. At that point of time, I kept feeling the stock is very, very cheap and there is a big runway ahead because the housing boom had not yet happened in India. People needed houses and the mortgage penetration in this country had a long way to grow. And LIC was one of the top leaders in the industry. Of course, it's another matter that later on we have realized that PSU companies rarely generate wealth that is sustainable. But look at what happened post 2009 fall. The stock fell from 400 to 200. That's a 50% crash in a matter of 1 year. And in the next 2 years, it went from 200 rupees to 1200 rupees. That is like a 6x rise in the next 2 years. Because the stock was cheap, because the opportunity existed, and because the balance sheet of the company was not deteriorated to the extent that the company won't survive, I had the audacity to hold on through this sharp correction. I was feeling very stupid at that point of time, I can assure you. But all's well that ends well. I held on to it through the fall and waited for my opportunity in 2012-13 to sell out of this, and it gave me handsome return. So you need conviction to hold. As I say, you need vision who's going to do well, then you need conviction to hold. So a lot of times what happens is that you might have bought, you think you have the vision. So for example, in 2002-03, everybody was buying Eicher Motors for the commercial vehicle story. At that point of time, the economy was rebounding cyclically, and everybody was very excited that Eicher Motors will be able to provide strong competition to Tata's and Ashok Leyland, and that is why one should be buying. But nobody had any clue that it is the real money spinner is going to be turn out to be the Royal Enfield. At that point of time, everybody was ignoring. Royal Enfield, the Bullet. And that is what has actually led to the wealth creation. So was that skill or was that luck? Another example of this is Titan. 2002-3, similar story. They had gotten into trouble because of their international operations. They had taken out a lot of debt, and jewelry was not even in the realm of possibility. Everybody was trying to see if the watch business can turn around, and if it turns around, it was very profitable. Today, nobody cares about Titan watches. Watches is a slower growing, almost a dying business. Today, Apple Watch has taken over so much of the market share, and the today's story in Titan is Tanishq. Now, if you had told me in 2002-3 that I am buying because Titan is getting into jewelry business and they will make it big, I would have told you you are foolish. Jewelry is a very, very tough business. They will not be able to create. People go to their family jeweler and buy their jewelry. Nobody will go to Tata showroom. They're always scared. They will not be able to establish trust. But that is how it has panned out. So again, was it skill or was it luck? Another company that I bought was a company called Natco, and Natco is a pharma company, and we had bought for one particular drug called Copaxone. This company, when we had bought, was at 1,000 crore market cap, and in our scenarios, one of the possibility was that Copaxone itself can have 1,000 crore kind of profits. If that is the case, then it is a blinder, and we should be looking to buy. It did happen. Copaxone did generate about 700-800 crore kind of profit for Natco, but it happened much later. In 2010, when we bought, finally the Copaxone played out in 2017. 7 years. Our expectation was it will start from 2014. It happened 3 years late. But in between, a couple of other drugs came in, which made the stock a multi-bagger. So it is not that we had any clue whether which drug was going to do well, but we believed in the opportunity, we believed in the promoter, and we believed the valuations were in favor. That is how the investing is. Investing is not very clear cut. There is no clarity always. The clarity is always in hindsight. It is in the rear view mirror. You can see this is why the stock went up. But when it is happening, very few people can actually visualize clearly what is happening and why it will continue to happen. So it does not matter whether it was skill or luck, as long as you learn from it. It would be a waste if you did not learn from it. So I'm coming to the last portion of my presentation, and this is what the chart of Titan looks like since Rakesh Jhunjhunwala had invested. He picked up nearly 10-11% of the company at a little more than 30 crores his stake. So you can imagine approximately 300 crores odd market cap and 30 crores he had deployed in that. And at that point of time, people used to wonder, who is he going to sell his stock to? It is very difficult to build position in such a small cap stock, and then it is even more difficult to exit that stock when things go wrong. I am not saying that he had the complete vision to see what's going to happen, but the odds are in his favor when he took that bet. But let's see what the journey looks like. Okay, this journey in this chart looks like, yeah, of course you buy in 2001 and you hold on till 2021 and you're going to make fantastic return. Let me just take you through some of the things that happened. So this was 2012 to 2013. There was a huge fall of more than 50-60%. In 2008-9, another drop of 50%. In 2017-19, another big drop, and which would have scared you out of your position, no doubt about it. This is what it looks like. In the last 2 decades, Titan has fallen twice between 25 and 30%, 11 times between 30 and 50%, and 2 times upwards of 50%, and once almost 82%. So this is the kind of fall. This is what it looks like. You have the you might have the vision to see. You might have the you might take a big position, but will you be able to hold on with conviction through these kind of ups and downs, that is what is needed to create wealth. So everyone had the same opportunity, but not many could identify. Even fewer could build substantial position, and only one has held through the ups and downs. So a lot of people say that Titan made RJ because he managed to, have a 10% stake. But if that was the case, then everybody had the same opportunity, right? Everybody could have built that kind of a stake, whoever had that kind of money. Let me say not everyone, but a lot of people at their own end could have built a large position by their own standard. If you had 100 rupees to put, you could have put 25 rupees into Titan. And that would have been a substantial wealth creator for you as well. So he had the vision to see that Titan can become a great company. He had the courage to build a large position, and he had the conviction to hold through all those ups and downs. All the three things are necessary for you to actually create wealth by investing in equities, which rounds up back to my original hypothesis, which is that investing in equities is simple, but it is not easy. This is a quote from a book that I really like, which is there is a character called Jesse Livermore in the book Reminiscences of a Stock Operator. And he actually went bankrupt thrice, and he actually died bankrupt, and he committed suicide. But the book is full of learning that I would really urge you to read, because investing is not a game of intelligent, it's not like you have intelligence and you can be a great investor. It is more about temperament. The most important organ in your body that is required for investing is your stomach. It is your gut. The ability to withstand losses, the ability to hold on to your position, the ability to hold on to your conviction through ups and downs. Men who can be both right and sit tight are uncommon. I found it one of the hardest things to learn, but it is only after a stock operator has firmly grasped this that he can make big money. So as you can see, the entire presentation of mine was made to buy right, say sit tight is easier said than done. Thank you, and happy investing, and happy to take questions. Should I stop sharing screen?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ravi bhai. Mamta Ben?
Yes, I'm there.
Yeah. Anyone have any question? Please, you can directly ask.
May I ask a question?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Ravi bhai, for sharing your insight into the equity trading. I have a question regarding the recent IPO craze going on. If you see, starting from Zomato and all the unicorns following them, they have valuation of 10 billion, 5 billion, something like that upon IPO listing. Does it really make sense, considering that they never made money so far?
So, very pertinent question, very current question, and give me some time to address that. I am not going to give you a clear-cut answer, but I will try and still give you an answer that hopefully will make sense. So, one point that you mentioned, that they are still loss-making. I think even if they are loss-making does not mean that there is no value to this company. There is a lot of value, and you can see this value when you yourself would be using either Swiggy or Zomato. Your family members will be using Swiggy and Zomato. So the obvious need for the service is very clear. And now there are only two players left in the industry. Even Uber Eats got acquired, and there are not many other people who can come and challenge this. So this will become, so to say, a duopoly structure. Leaving valuations aside, is there a sense to the business model? I would believe so. Don't go by profit and loss. So Amazon had been loss making for almost 10-15 years, but it was always positive cash flow generating. The thing to focus on over here is twofold. One is whether they make money at the unit cost level, which is the contribution level. For every trip that the delivery person makes, is it making money or does it make sense? Are they charging 25 rupees or 30 rupees? On that 25-30 rupees, are they making money or losing money? If that unit economics level, if they are making money, then don't worry about the fact that at company level they are not making money at this point of time. So that is number one. And the number two is cash flow. The business model should be able to generate cash flow to sustain itself. They should not keep coming to the equity markets to sustain. Essentially, there is a land grab happening right now where you are trying to take away as much market share as possible. I believe that phase is gotten over in this particular industry because now both the entrenched players have close to 50% kind of a market share. Now there is no point in trying to discount further. There is no third player that is coming. Okay, there might be small regional players that might still be there, or competition can come in from unforeseen places. But at this point of time, the valuations, so the market is saying that these two players will survive and they will keep growing at a faster pace, and the profitability phase is in somewhere in the future. I am not saying market's assumptions are right. I am saying this is what market's assumption is. If you believe that market is wrong, avoid. But there is somebody out there who believes it is right. This is going to be a duopoly industry. Unit economics are in place. There is profits to be made in the future, and there is no threat of competition coming. That, in a nutshell, is the synopsis of what a bull is thinking. The bull on the Zomato. Again, having said that, disclaimer from my end: I have not bought, I am not buying, but I am just trying to show you what the thinking is. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ravi bhai, I am taking another question which member has given in the chat box.
Sure.
What are your views for overall markets in near term? It is high, saturated, or still there is some fuel?
So my entire presentation was trying to make you look through whatever correction is coming up ahead. However, it is natural to definitely think about market correcting because market has rallied one side for 18 months. But the real question is not whether market has saturated, whether market is going to correct. The question is this an absolutely the wrong time to be investing? See, what you want to be avoiding is buying at the peak of, let's say, when the Harshad Mehta scam happened, or Ketan Parekh scam happened, or global financial crisis happened. In last 3 decades, these are the 3 points at which one should have absolutely not invested. Any other point you take, and 5 years down the line, you would have still made money, provided you did not get into stocks which were completely fraud. So my answer to your question would be, yes, there is definitely a correction that is lurking around here. It is whether it comes now, 2 months down the line, 6 months down the line, whether it happens on all these IPOs, or whether it happens when tapering starts, or whether it happens when interest rates start rising, whether it happens because of LIC IPO. Market will find its reason for correction, and correction will come when the least market everybody is expecting. So don't be bothered or too obsessed with trying to time that correction. Try and be focused on where is the opportunity, because I believe from 3 to 5 years point of view, market is providing an opportunity. Why? Because economic cycle has just turned, and this economic upcycle is going to last. And I see a case for this economic cycle being much longer, much more pronounced than what we witnessed in 2003 to 8. what is the reason why I feel that this economic cycle is going to last longer? The starting point in 2003 was interest rates were at 4.5%. Today they are at 4%. The starting point in 2003, the banking NPAs were at about 4.5% net NPAs. Today, no, I'm sorry, they were more at 11-12%. Today they are at about 8.5%. Then the real estate cycle had not even begun in 2003. It began in 2005. While in this one, the real estate cycle has already begun at the premium end. The IT boom has already also started in the last 12-18 months. In the kind of hiring that is happening in IT sector, one has to see to believe. Two wage hikes given by TCS and Infosys in the same year. It has never happened in the past. And the conditions prevalent. So what has happened is a lot of people think that this government has not done anything for the last 6-7 years. But as I said, that bad news makes headlines, good news and gradual improvement does not get noticed. So there are lots of small steps that have been taken. Actually, very big steps also have been taken. So people try to crib about GST and all that, or the implementation of GST or the filing and painful. But the fact of the matter today is that GST has united entire India as one market. We are connected now with Jan Dhan Mobile Aadhaar. We have something called as India Stack, which enables all these startups to create an app based on this India Stack. This India Stack is a public utility, and it enables you to do a KYC and verification, validation, all that can happen without revealing the identity of the person. So it's the kind of foundation that we have built, and the stimulus now that we have got from the low interest rates and the amount of money flowing into Indian economy. We are witnessing the highest amount of inflows in FDI into India. Highest not only for India but highest in the world. We are getting more FDI than US and China also, at about $75-80 billion. The startup economy this year will get close to $30 billion. $30 billion, just to put it in perspective, Silicon Valley startups would be getting somewhere between $70-80 billion. So $30 billion is almost 40-50% of what the startups in US are getting. And that is a huge stimulus, external stimulus that is coming into the economy. Something that the government didn't provide is coming from the private sector, from foreign money. Where is all this money going? This money is going into either buying out other companies, or expanding capacities, or doing R&D, or building infrastructure. And when that money is spent in the economy, again, to provide a context, $75 billion of FDI is roughly about 1.5% of the GDP. And this is a far bigger stimulus that we have ever received in the past. So that is, and it's not like government is not doing its bit. Government is supporting the lower strata. Government is also ensuring that they try to do more spending. Till now, they have been focused on supply side. For the first time now, demand side stimulus has also come. It all started with the 25% tax rate cut that they gave. Corporations in India are at 25% tax rate. Lowest interest rates, lowest tax. There was no investment in capacities for 5-7 years. Suddenly the demand booms, and we have a huge boom that is waiting to happen. Whoever survived COVID is right now rolling in money. So the boom has just started. The economic boom has just started. It is not going to peter out overnight. Market might move a step or two ahead of economy. Economy will move up to catch up, and markets might move down, and we might again have the next leg of rally at some point of time. So I believe we are in a multi-year bull market. Ignore the 3-month, 6-month correction that is going to happen, 20% correction that is going to happen. At some point it will come. I will not be able to time it. Had I been worried about it for the 6-8 months, I would have missed the last 8 months rally also. So I look at it as, since I've managed to survive and stay invested for the last 8 months, it's bonus. Anyway, from all points of time, I look at my portfolio as 100 minus 20 only, so that I don't get worried about portfolio falling. I hope that answers your question.
The next question is, what should be a parameter for long-term investors should look while buying business today?
So the framework for me is very simple. One, you need a large addressable opportunity. So the way to think about it, since we have spoken about Zomato, I'll delve a little bit more on it. There are about 130, 140 crore people, which is about 25, 30 crore households. Today, how many of them are online, connected to bank accounts and having mobile phones? A lot of them, probably 80, 90 crore of them. But how many of them are ordering online? A small percentage of it. I don't have the exact number. So that tells you that there is still a long runway ahead. This industry can keep growing for a long period of time. Now, that is number one. So it has to have a long runway of growth that is possible. Second, the business model has to be scalable. Scalable, again, the same thing that for incremental sale that they do, the cost should be less and less, and they should be able to grow. So that business model should be scalable. Third, they should have some amount of sustainable competitive advantage, which in this case, it's already proven because some of the others died along the way. So sustainable competitive advantage. Number four, obviously you want a management that will, see, you will not be able to predict what changes are going to happen to technology, how will the business models change, and who will face the disruption. What you want to bet on is a management that can foresee that and act accordingly for you. One example of such management is Bajaj Finance. Today, there is a lot of talk about fintechs and lending and buy now, pay later, all kinds of finance tech companies coming in, and Bajaj Finance can stand to lose. But most of them say Bajaj Finance is a far more technologically evolved company than even the new age startups. So what you need is a management who can visualize what changes are coming and adapt, who are riding the wave, who are leading the wave rather than being followers. And last but not the least is the valuations. You need to buy at a point in time when the risk reward is in your favor. So you don't have to attend every party in town. You might not want to go to Zomato. You might want to go to some other party. The money is made by sitting on it, by holding on for a long period of time. So if you buy something at this point of time, maybe initially you might make money, but if your conviction is going to get tested on a 20-30% kind of a fall, then you might as well not buy that, because reinvestment risk is the most underappreciated risk in the market. You might buy something and make money and sell. Where will you put that money next? If you have a good company that has a long runway, hold on to it, don't sell, because finding a next great company is going to be a big challenge. So to just summarize, this is my framework of how to find companies, how to look for long-term investments, but you have to keep building your conviction in the company, in the industry, by doing constant research. Buy and hold does not mean buy and forget. It only means buy and keep constantly reviewing it, keep constantly building conviction in the company that you own. So if your conviction gets shaken, then you will end up losing your position. And it is very challenging to find new opportunities all the time.
Thank you, Ravi bhai. The next question is, what are the biggest mistakes an investor makes?
So I don't know the biggest, but I can tell you the biggest risk that the investor faces is the investor himself. It is not the market. It is not the central banks of the world. It is not anything else, but the investor themselves. We constantly have to fight our own biases. Sometimes I saw a stock at 10 rupees. It has moved quickly to 20 rupees. I will not buy. Why? Because I saw it at 10 rupees. That is anchoring bias. If I can see that 10 rupees eventually becoming 100 rupees, will it matter that it has become 20 rupees right now? No. So what you need is to have that conviction that it can become 100 rupees at some point in future, and I'll buy at 20 rupees, understanding that it can fall also, and if it does, then I will be willing to buy more. So you have to understand how you are going to position size yourself, how you are going to enter into so you have to guard against your own biases. There are lots of confirmation biases. If you buy something and the stock price goes up, you believe you are right. Stock price is the worst kind of confirmation. You constantly need to be focused on whether the company fundamentals are panning out. Just because stock price is moving up does not mean that you are right. Just because stock price falls also does not mean you are wrong. You need to have that conviction that what you have bought, you should know what you have bought, why you have bought, and how long you will hold on. So the biggest risk to the investor is always the investor himself, because he might believe one thing but can end up contradicting himself.
Thank you, Ravi bhai. We are done with the questions on chat box. Yogesh bhai, are you there?
Yeah, Mamta ma'am. Anyone have any question, any doubt, please directly ask. We have 5 minutes more. Have any question?
Hello, Ravi bhai. If I can ask the question directly over here, I had actually posted on chat box. So now looking at the entire discussion, it was, pretty much concluding that we have to be invested and alert as well. I would like to ask, what are your 10 picks, 10 specialty shares which we can do an SIP or, kind of directly invest into the equity, irrespective of the share prices, for maybe 20-30 years time horizon, just like we do a safe investment or investment in debt mutual fund. I think similarly, if we look at a longer horizon, we can pick up some shares and continue investing in this. If you can share your views on that and some 5 or 7 odd shares.
Yes, so Harshil bhai, I am actually disappointed that my slides did not register with you. In my disclaimer slide, I had clearly mentioned, please don't ask me about a specific stock or any kind of a tip. That is number one. And number two, I had so many slides which showed you that the top companies of today are not going to be the top companies 10 years down the line. So taking a 10, 20, 30-year call at this point of time is impossible in my opinion. You have to have something called as a rolling view. You might think that this is the company that will do well over the next 10, 20, 30 years, but that also does not mean buy and forget. You have to keep reevaluating if the fundamentals of the industry are changing or the fundamentals of the company are changing, and whether new risks are emerging. So it is not easy, and I will not hazard naming any company for 10, 20, 30 year period. Forget 10, 20. I will not name any company to buy or sell for the next 1-2 year also. So please, you'll have to excuse me for that.
Noted. Thanks.
Ravi bhai, it's a personal question here, that most of the investor now going for the mutual fund, not directly for the equity, for the risk orientation and all. What your suggestion on that?
So I think I don't know if your conclusion that most people are going for mutual fund is correct or no, but let's assume that it is. I think it is not such a bad idea. If you want to go direct equity, you either need time as well as the aptitude to understand the markets, understand the stocks, and do it. Mutual fund is a very, very good route to eliminate that risk. See, a company can go bust, a company can go to zero. Very rarely will a mutual fund go to zero. But you have to expect the market returns over there. Mutual funds cannot provide you too much of a different return than whatever the market provides. Will be plus or minus 2% of whatever the market provides. So mutual funds are a great route. SIP is a very good way of eliminating the behavioral risk, the psychological things that play with you. Whether market is up or down, you keep investing. The money to be made in equities is by buying and holding for a long period of time. So whatever helps you in holding for a long period of time, you should do it. So SIP is a good way. You have to think 20-30 years when you are doing SIP. You first 5-7 years, you just keep putting money. Don't think today it is down. After 5 years also SIP is not making money. If you start thinking that, then you have not understood the markets and you have not understood the product SIP also. You have to think 20-30 years and you have to keep investing for first 5-7 years, maybe even more. So yes, mutual funds are a great way to invest for somebody who has no time and inclination, and SIP is a fantastic way to take care of all the behavioral biases that investor brings to the table. Because even in mutual funds, sometimes the money comes in usually when the market is doing well, and it goes out when the market is not doing well. You might enter at any point of time, but definitely don't exit at the worst point of time. Then you have made two mistakes: entering at the wrong time and exiting at the wrong time, and that made your capital loss permanent. If you have entered at the wrong time, you can actually spread out your investments over a long period of time so that there is dollar cost averaging.
So for what the new investor, what you suggest, partly amount to be invested in mutual fund or something in the gold or the market directly, what you suggest for the new investor to go out?
So I am not an expert on other asset classes, whether it is fixed income or gold. I focus purely on equities. My 100% of allocation is to equities, besides the house that I live in and maybe one more house that I have, but that is not for investment purpose. Otherwise, 100% of my asset is allocated towards equities. What I would say is the way to think about equities, I can provide you with a framework. See, India is a young country. India is a young economy as well. It's been only 30 odd years since we opened up our economy. We used to be a socialistic society, socialistic economy, where we used to constantly face all kinds of shortages in 70s and 80s, from rationing to cement to everything, whatever, there was always shortage. In 92, we decided to open up our economy because that economy opened up, and then subsequently there have been so many more reforms which has led to capitalism coming. We are not yet fully capitalistic society, but we are moving slowly towards it. So we are a democratic society, we are a capitalistic society, and we have a set of entrepreneurs who are good at creating wealth. We have seen huge amount of wealth that getting created in IT industry, in technology, whether the new age technology companies, in pharma industry, and we have competed everywhere in the world. So if that is the case, then I want to be an owner of asset. I don't, gold, yes, sure, gold prices can go up, but treat gold as an insurance. Gold is not an investment product. It will retain the value. If actually speaking, if you take a very, very long period of time, gold has not managed to beat inflation also. But people have the recency bias. From 2003 to 2011-12, we had fantastic run in gold. And then again, a couple of years back also, we had a good run in gold. People think gold always makes money, but gold is an insurance. You keep it for the rainy day, but it is not a growth product. Fixed income, today at 4.5% interest rate, there will be FDs at 6%, 7%, and post-tax return will be 4.5%. What you will earn out of that? You will not be able to beat inflation also. So honestly speaking, real estate and equities are the only two asset classes left where you can hope to earn more than 10%, 12% kind of return. The problem with real estate is liquidity, and the problem with equities is also liquidity, and I will explain why. The problem in real estate is that when you need money, you are not able to sell. In equities, the problem is because it is so liquid, you will end up selling sooner. In real estate, most people make money because by default, you will hold a house or something for 10, 20 years. Nobody buys and sells in 3 months, 3 days, or even 3 years. People hold for a long period of time. It is the long period of time that makes the returns. So my advice is, if you are, again, it depends on your personal situation. What is your age, stage, whether you can take risk. If you are very close to retiring, then probably having 100% kind of equity allocation is not for you. But some amount of equity allocation is a must for everybody. And if you are at a stage in your life where you are still in the capital building stage, then you should have a higher proportion of equities as compared to others. That is how I think about it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Sir, one more question for the new investor. What your suggestion, sir?
I didn't understand. The biggest
For the
thing-
market, yeah, for the new investor, how the person should think about the market? Should you invest most of the fund in A grade or something C grade or that grading industry, or what? What do you suggest?
Mutual fund is the best route. SIP is the best route. Keep investing. If you are young, if you are new to the market, first get your asset allocation right, which is if you're not invested in equities, you're definitely not going to do well over a long period of time. So have 10, 20, 30% or even 50% allocation depending on your risk appetite. Then let it grow for a long period of time. Don't be in a hurry. So the number one rule for enjoying the fruits of compounding is don't disturb it unnecessarily. So let your wealth compound. Give it time. If you don't have the aptitude or the time to do investing on your own, then I suggest go through the mutual fund route. And if you are kind of a person who gets impacted by markets going up and down, when if you become greedy when market goes up and become fearful when market goes down, then you might as well do it through SIP, because it neutralizes the emotions.
Thank you, sir. Mamta Babe, any question further?
Sir, Ravi bhai, I just wanted to know about that. What are the industries, not the companies? As you said, the companies you will keep away from speaking on. A specific company you won't be able to answer. But I just would like to know what are the industries which are supposed to be in the next 10 or 20 years of a time period, which would be a good investment industry areas, like may it be a property shares, may it be an software shares or an FMCG or something like. What are the best 5 industry-wise areas which one should look into for investment purposes and coming 10 to 20 years of time? In your views, what are the best industries like?
Sure. Fair question. I will try and answer it. So at this juncture, I believe there is a lot of favorable risk-reward scenario in financial sector. Now, there are certain sectors, financials, consumer, pharmaceutical, and IT, technology. These are all-weather sectors. You might want to hold off if a particular sector like IT has rallied a lot in the last 12 months. You can wait for a 3-6 month period till it corrects and consolidates to enter. But from a long-term point of view, these are all-weather sectors. Within that sector, some companies can do very well and some companies cannot do very well. But these sectors are always going to be around, and one should be always looking to have some exposure to these sectors. Then there are certain cyclical sectors, whether it is auto, whether it is manufacturing, capital goods, whether it is real estate, as you mentioned. These are cyclical. I believe we are at a stage from where the cycle is going to pick up. The economic cycle is going to pick up. So at this juncture, you should have exposure to the cyclical industry as well. But these cyclical industries are not meant for stocks to be kept for 10, 20 years. These are more stocks that you keep for 3, 4, 5 years and keep reevaluating, because at some point the cycle turns again. Real estate, the cycles are usually long. Upturn lasts 6, 8, 10 years and the downturn lasts 5, 6, 7 years. So we are just ending the downturn, which lasted from 2013, 14 to 2021 and 20. So the upturn has just started. So the real estate cycle will do well. But you don't have to play the real estate cycle by buying land or by buying real estate developer. There are many other ways to play. You can buy a housing finance company. You can buy companies that are into building material, consumer electricals. Things. If you buy a house today, you have to think logically, what are all the things that will go into my house? I'll need new fans, lights, wiring. I'll need maybe sanitary ware, all those things, flooring, tiles, all those things will go into the real estate. And if the real estate cycle is there, then these companies will also do well. These sectors will also do well. So the theme is economic cycle revival, and one should have exposure to these economic cycle revival. And I believe the risk reward is very favorable in these companies, because right now the secular sectors like IT and consumers are not providing such a favorable risk reward at this juncture. You would be better off not going too much overweight on these sectors at this point of time.
Yeah, thank you, Ravi bhai. Anyone has question? Mamta Ben?
And there are no question in the chat box.
So, anyone have a question? We have 5 minutes more. I think so. Ravi bhai, you cover all the things. So no one has any doubt on that.
And, everybody enjoyed, and thank you for providing me with the opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you, Ravi bhai. Today's session learns a lot regard to the market ups and down correlate with the individual stocks. What the today market will look, as someone has given me the tips, we go ahead. But you learn that stock require to understand before it investing. Your today's presentation is very interesting, as you have preferably correlate stock with the outside world, how that affect and make money with calculative risk. Not only the investment, but holding the long-term investment that make a stock a long profit. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ravi bhai, to understand this thing in 2-hour session that mostly require a month training. Thank you, Ravi bhai.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And explaining each and every question, depth answer, that's also a very good thing. Thank you, sir. Thank you all members for attending today's session. One important announcement for the next session is, as we have a next session on 30th November after Diwali on topic of presentation for service tax notice. As show cause, we have a current topics by speaker CA Payal Shah. This meeting we kept physically. The detail we circulate further. Thank you all. Closing today's ceremony, session with official ceremony as grand wishes of Diwali, happy Diwali and prosperous New Year in advance. We close today's session. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you, and wishing you all a happy Diwali in advance.
Thank you, Ravi bhai. Thank you. Happy Diwali.
Thank you, Ravi bhai. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Ravi.
Thank you, members.